A very interesting topic on oppositionless government in a democracy, trends and challenges.
Motto principles and all. To organize this type of things, it is not that we are having certain kind of approach or something that against the policy, this and that thing, but it is a kind of a discussion which we wanted to make for our understanding. As an intellectual body, we want to learn so many things from here and there. So that is the motive behind which we organize this kind of discussion, to learn for our knowledge and to understand.
Panelist, Dr. Khriezo Yhome, Senior Fellow, Asian Confluence, Shillong, Meghalaya. Sir.
Begin with the nomenclature itself, the opposition-less government. Now, as you all know, Nagaland made history by becoming the first opposition-less government in India. It's interesting to note that this opposition-less government or opposition-less nomenclature has been used by the government of India as a term that kind of contributes to the political discourse that we have. Now, the existing political nomenclatures that exist for such governments are, for instance, an all-party government, interim government, or also unity government. So we have already these existing political nomenclatures for government formation. But what the Nagaland government has actually now contributed to this is with this nomenclature called opposition-less government. What actually baffles me to understand why the government has opted for an opposition-less government, or the term, why they have opted for this term opposition-less. In my simple understanding, one way of explaining this is that in 2001, when the government formed this opposition-less government, there were 3 political parties and a few independent candidates or legislators. So perhaps to give a sense that the government also included these independent legislators, they would have, in their collective wisdom, thought that an opposition-less would better suit the coalition government. However, this also is not very convincing if we look at the other terms that exist. Why then they have not opted for an all-party or a unity government? Again, unity government is perhaps more suited to define and to capture what was happening. But again, for whatever reasons, the government decided to, again, go for this opposition-less government remains a mystery. Now, for interim governments are normally temporary in nature, and by very nature, they have a specific period. So, the reason why the government did not go for the term interim is probably because they would have, in their wisdom, thought that this government is not for a specific period. And then also, to my mind, they probably have come to a certain conclusion that they would not be able to, contribute or play a role or convince the Indian government and the government of Nagaland or the legislatures towards finding an early solution to the Naga issue, which remains, an unresolved issue. So I think, given all this reasoning, they probably have decided to go for opposition-less. But what I don't understand, or what still baffles me, is why opposition-less government when there are other, terminologies, nomenclatures that would well define the government. So that's my first point. The second point I want to touch upon is on the trends. The trends as far as democracy is concerned. Now, if you look around the state of democracy around the world, studies after studies have been saying and have been showing that the state of democracy or the quality of democracy has been declining over the years. All these international organizations who have been tracking, who have been monitoring this democracy, the state of democracy in the world, suggest that whether it be the International IDEA or the Pew Research Center, all suggest that today the state of democracy is not in a good shape. In fact, I think last year the Economist Intelligence Unit, they came up with their annual report on democracy index report that says or shows that about 8% of the world's population are actually living in full functioning democracy. And about 37% are living in a flawed democracy, while about 55% are living in a democracy where there is no democracy at all. So that's the state of democracy we have today around the world. Now, if we look at the kind of the government formations around the world in recent years, again, we have seen, just look around, if you look around our neighborhood, we have examples. For instance, you take the case of Myanmar. In 2001, when the military coup happened, the Aosunep parliamentarians, they formed a government called the National Unity Government. So we have examples of legislators, parliamentarians forming this National Unity Party or Unity Party. Then we also have in Sri Lanka in last year when they faced one of the worst economic crises since its independence, the new government under President NSA, they have been trying to form an all-party government. So an all-party government as a form of governing a crisis or a transition or to deal with a political economic crisis is it's not a recent phenomenon. It has been happening for many years and it continues to happen, that we can see around in the neighborhood itself. So that's basically the sort of trends that we can see as far as democracy is concerned. Then you have the challenges. If you look at, again, the challenges of parliamentary system of government around the world. As I say, the state of democracy is in a terrible shape. And I think a lot of studies have shown that there are 3 or 4 factors that are behind this. The first being the rise of strong men. What I mean by this is that, across the world, we have seen the rise of very powerful politicians. And that has, in a sense, diminished the role of opposition parties. Now, what has happened is that the opposition is reduced to a tokenism or a tame opposition without any effective role in performing its role as an opposition in the parliaments. We can see the examples of these in Turkey, the rise of Erdogan. We see this in Russia, the rise of Vladimir Putin, and we can see that in our own country, the rise of Prime Minister. That's, I think, the first point that, and a lot of other scholars have pointed out, that why democracy is in the state that it is today is because of the rise of powerful politicians. And I think the second point that has also been pointed out is the rise of right-wing politics. Now again, that this phenomenon we can see across democracies in the world. This has also given rise to the majoritarian politics. And this majoritarian politics, what it has done is it has marginalized the smaller parties, the minorities, and pushed them to a negligible role as far as parliament is concerned or assembly is concerned. Now, the third factor that scholars point out is also about the lack of ideological politics. That's again a major issue. Ideological politics in terms of social welfare, in terms of the great ideological fight that we have seen in the Cold War period, the capitalists and the socialists. That sort of a strong ideological basis for politics is not there today, and therefore the rise of this right-wing politics. So I think if you look at the trends and the challenges of democracy around the world today, I think we have these huge problems that democracy faces. So let me just make my last comment in my introductory remarks to say that I think what's happening in Nagaland, or what we're seeing in Nagaland, is actually a symptom of the larger phenomenon that we see around the world. But I'm still not convinced, or I'm still I still don't understand. I still don't have a reason to explain why the term oppositionless has to be used to define the.
He has talked on the nomenclature of oppositionless government. He talked on 3 points. That is the first one. The second point that he emphasized was on the various trends going on the democratic system of governance. The third point that is stressed on was challenges to parliamentary democracy. Tovika so head Department of Political Science, Bosco College, Kohima, to share views.
When we say democracy, what is democracy? We ask ourselves. We all know what is democracy. Democracy basically means the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We all know that, right? We have studied that in class 5, 6, and so on. But what we see now, the trend that is happening over the world, and something which we have seen in Nagaland in the past 5 to 10 years is oppositionless government. So when we have an oppositionless government, it is a big challenge to democracy itself. The very essence of what democracy is being targeted. And that is happening, as one of our panelists have already discussed, it's happening in all the parts of the world. Be it a parliamentary system of government or presidential system of government, we see that democracy has been targeted. And it is being targeted because there is a presence of oppositionless government. Now let's come back to Nagaland. Right. So oppositionless government in the year 2015, oppositionless government in the year 2021, and right now we have another oppositionless government. So we elect our representative to be our spokesperson in the assembly. But when they become part of the oppositionless government, isn't our democracy in threat? Isn't is it not? We can say that it is a big threat to the democratic system that exists in India or that exists in our own state. So why is this happening? Right. When we say oppositionless government in a democracy, we know we all are educated people. We know what is happening and we know what is the meaning of oppositionless government in democracy. Now, why is this happening? All over the world, or even in Nagaland, why is this happening? My second point is that it is happening because political ideology is dying all over the world. Many leaders are joining politics, many people are joining politics without knowing the very essence of what political ideology is. Many are joining the different political parties over the world without knowing what is the ideology of that particular government is, or what that particular party is. So ideology, political ideology is dying all over the world, and especially in a state like Nagaland. We don't have ideology. We don't have political ideology. We have different political parties from different parties coming and forming an oppositionless government with different ideologies forming a government, an oppositionless government. So ideology, political ideology is something that has died. So it is the role of academia, it is the role of the researcher, it is the role of teachers, it is the role of us as scholars to make sure that we let the people understand what political ideology is. When we do that, the challenges that democracy is facing in the world because of oppositionless government, we can somehow solve this issue in our own little way. So with these 2 points, I would like to conclude my introductory remark that it is the role of the academia to make sure that ideology, political ideology is made understood to the people all over the world in our own state. Then democracy will not be betrayed or it will not be challenged.
Emphasize on some few points. The first one is how oppositionless government is a big challenge to democracy. He also emphasized on how oppositionless government is a big threat to the democratic ethos. He also emphasized on the dying nature of political ideology. And lastly, he remarked about the role, the challenges, the role of the academy to make people educate about the democratic ethos. Dr. Daili Kholia, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Daili College.
That we have been discussing so far, oppositionless vis-a-vis democracy that we have been discussing. About these political historical realities as far as the democratic political process is concerned in Nagaland. Oppositionless government, if we were to say in the purest sense, I think yes, 2015, 2021 could have been some of such cases. But even in the past, we have seen how the political dynamics that exist in the state of Nagaland as far as the democratic politics is concerned. We see that in 1998, I think the 1998 intervention of civil society's NGOs, we see that it was almost an oppositionless government. There was only one opposition. If I'm not wrong, I think Marvin Kia was the one opposition member. Again, by 2003, we come across a cluster of various political parties. There was a paradigm shift of the Nagaland political system, which was more to do with the two-party system, and it was slowly inclining or turning into a coalition politics, where in 2003 we have seen that so many political parties have formed, and that's how the Daili coalition government came to be. And I think with that, the eroding of party system started taking place. And with that, if you see in 2008, how the NPF and non-Congress party had sided with the ruling party, or even in 2013 we see that. And by 2018 it is a different picture now. And today it is of course a very different picture. We see that even today, when we talk about this oppositionless, we come across the BJP leader saying that one of the BJP leaders saying that we are not calling them, we are not inviting them, but they are inviting themselves. We come across such scenarios, which itself indicates the nature of the party dynamics that exist in our state, which is very different from other parts of the country or even other parts of the world. So here, when we talk about oppositionless, we have to take into context various aspects. The political adventurism that we see in our state, it also reflects of what a matter is determined or shaped by a very strong political personality. A very strong political personality that we have seen. In the past, there were a lot of leadership toss-up, if you see. But today, we have a very strong political personality. That I think is also one factor that also can shape the party system. Again, another thing is that we also come across the stand or the kind of or the nature of legislature, where they have to be answerable or they are having various kind of obligations. Again, the public vote banks. Under what reason they are voting? You know, all these are factors that are responsible for creating this kind of an oppositionless government. So there are so many reasons which we have to look into. We have to read between those lines, and we have to track all those in order to come to a conclusion. So ours is very different as far as oppositionless is solving the Naga problem. That has been one reason. And various political parties coming together. I think 2015 was influenced by 2014 Lok Sabha election when Narendra Modi came to power. So that has been one reason maybe. Again, 2021 NPF defecting with that two-third majority maybe, and again supporting the US government. There are so many reasons, so many factors, and we are not here to criticize any personality or political party, but we are going to discuss. We are trying to come to a conclusion, concretizing these scenarios and trying to understand more. So, just some of those views. I believe later on in the discussion we will be having many more things to discuss.
We talk about from the Nagaland point of view, mostly. And he has shared about the democratic principles in the state of Nagaland. He also shared about the political dynamics in our state. He also shared on various factors how oppositionless government is happening in our own state. The political, it is because of the political personality. It is because of the nature of the legislature. It is because of the public movement. May I invite our last panelist, Professor Zavise Rume, advisor, Naga Scholars Association Kohima Regional Unit, President, and also the President, Nagaland Education Association.
Practice this type of opposition government since time immemorial. During our childhood days, we have not seen any opposition in our village. No opposition. No opposition party organization is set up in the village. So there was no opposition in Naga society in this party classless society like Naga society. And it is a way of life, and political party as such system was aligned, and it's a strange to the Naga culture, and we never see this. But modern politics brought this kind of culture, and then we enjoy with lots of leadership, and it was good. This is good. And sometimes when we could not understand during our childhood time, when opposition system of government was not properly understood, we thought that oppositions are enemies. We always thought, no, when we were young, when the opposition congress we thought, in our childhood perspective, we thought they were enemies. Okay, so like that we thought, but it was found so good, and then, as I'm saying, in opposition-less government, no party system, no class system is a part of our life, Naga, and where every elected member is accepted, and every member supports the government for the welfare of the people. So it is a very good system. But on the other hand, every member of the elected member should become critics to their own government now. Since there is no opposition, they should become the critics. They should become the analyzer, the political analyst. And there is no opposition to give the right to oppose the government in any harmful act or anything that is going against the welfare of the people. And the opposition-less government should be consensuous. It should be conscientious. There should not be any what is called opposition inside the government. It should be opposition-less, and they should accept each other, and equal responsibility should be shared in terms of the leadership and the authority, responsibilities and opportunities. All should be shared irrespective of the party affiliation, not being dominated by certain political parties. Then we can say that it's a opposition-less government. As President rightly pointed out, we are hoping for the unity government, yes. So that way, we can say that our elders are demonstrating the indigenous type of Naga indigenous type of Naga polity or Naga polity, which is also very, very similar to that kind of Greek polity in our ancient Greek society. So, in a way, there are so many criticisms as published by the local papers after the installation of the opposition-less government, but and then expressed the need for opposition in the democratic government. But when we do not have anyone to oppose in the parliament or in the assembly, then what to do? So it should be decided. It should have been decided, no? During the election campaign or prior to the election or general election time, it should be decided. And people should raise voice and then say that if we want to elect this type of people to say to the assembly that we want this type of government, we want this type of ideology, we want this type of political principles, no? And we will oppose this type of government, we will oppose this type of principle, ideology in the assembly. So that type of ideology, principle, people should put up, and then with that, such kind of agenda, people should vote. But these kind of things are not happening, and after election, people are saying that opposition should not be there, opposition-less government should not be installed. They are shouting, but when everyone join the government, or what to do? What to do? Can you call anyone to go and you should sit in the opposition? Can any one of you come and then tell any MLA? It's not possible, you see. So this is the situation where we are living, and therefore, whether good or bad, we have to now nurture the idea of opposition government since we are in this system. And now, therefore, we need to explore all possibilities what this kind of government, opposition-led government, can be nurtured and how it should be run. For example, proper allocation of portfolios and then equal responsibility, and this also can be good for our people because it can do away with or remove lots of regional disparities. No? So because in the past, when there is an opposition, then the opposition people in the constituency where the MLA is an opposition, they always say that, what to do? We cannot do anything this time. You see? They are just complaining like that, no? But this time, there is no opposition, so good idea should be nurtured so that a good understanding, consciousness, consensus comes among themselves, and then let them also share their responsibilities, their resources, reach rational distribution of resources. Rational distribution of resources to all the constituency is required. Leadership is required. So this, I think, this is also one of the best opportunities available for us to ensure that there is a rational distribution of resources and what is called leadership. And then so this is one way of what I'm thinking, and I think we also should nurture the idea, the original idea of our indigenous way of living, and this is one way we can explore together. But on the other hand, there are some dangers of opposition-led government. When no opposition is there, there is no opposition to oppose the policies and programs which are very harmful and dangerous to the people. When this is there, then it is very dangerous. And therefore, there should be an internal opposition within the opposition-led government. Every MLA should be given enough and the opportunity to oppose any issues, anything that is not good or which is harmful to the welfare society. And now there is no opposition, therefore all of us should become the critics of the government. In the past, we depend on the opposition people, opposition party to oppose the government. And when something goes wrong in the government, we always say that Congress should do like that, NPM should do like that, BJP should do like that, or any party should do like that because they are in the opposition. They should oppose. But today, there is no such situation. Therefore, we, all of us, including all of us, in every individual, should analyze, should become a critic to the government. We should be able to say this is good, this is bad, government is doing like that, very good, government is not doing good, it is not acceptable, is acceptable. That way all of us participate in the functioning of the government, and in a way, if this our elders practice like this, then we all say, we all practice, and let us try to see that this become one of Nagaland become one of the model, the best model of democracy government, opposition-led government in the whole world. Thank you.
A little bit on these views. He shared on the oppositionless government, and this oppositionless government is there since time immemorial in our society, because in our society we have a classless kind of society. We don't have different classes, and this kind of oppositionless government, this kind of culture is growing out because of modernity. He also shared about the strong ideology or the principles should create during the election and not after the election. He also shared on the rational distribution of resources and also the need for strong leaders. He also shared on the dangers, various dangers of this kind of oppositionless government. Thank you, Professor, once again for your thoughts.